I want to know what must it have been like for a young man of 19 to feel compelled to join the IRA?
The first thing that strikes me is the date. The 20th of November 1920 is significant. The months of October, November, December 1920 were arguably the real nadir of the Irish War of Independence.
The Irish War of Independence was a guerrilla campaign fought by the IRA against British government forces in Ireland. The IRA was backed by the Republican Sinn Féin party, which had won a landslide victory in Ireland in the 1918 general election. As IRA attacks on military and police targets spread throughout the country, the government sent over a new force to support the police, the Black and Tans. Nicknamed for their khaki army trousers and dark police tunics, the Black and Tans' brutal tactics only served to encourage IRA membership.
My grandfather would have been 17, a teenager, and I want to know, would a lot of his friends have joined?
The simple answer is that not everybody joined the IRA. Not everybody was wanted in the IRA because commanders realised that the bigger the organisation, the more amenable it was to penetration by intelligence.
So it is quite significant that he was allowed in.
It was absolutely, and you could certainly rely on him with a family background such as his, a pedigree such as his, a nephew of Michael Collins. The one thing that you wouldn't query would be his loyalty.
After Finian joined the IRA in November 1920, the guerrilla campaign in West Cork escalated. The IRA was burning police stations and killing policemen. Meanwhile, IRA men were being rounded up and often executed. The hills around Clonakilty were the scene of some of the most intense fighting. Using a copy of her grandfather's military file, Dervla is trying to piece together his IRA activities in the Clonakilty area.
There is a particular key incident that he refers to. Being surrounded by the British Army is an indication of the guerrilla warfare that he had a hand in. I really want to go to that area and just get a feel of what he was doing when he was 19 years of age.
Dervla's visiting Lissavard outside Clonakilty. She's arranged to meet local historian Timothy Crowley, a distant cousin she's never met before.
Welcome to West Cork.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I believe we're related.
We are. The easiest way to explain it, I think your mother and myself would be a fifth cousin.
Fifth cousins.
And we would have a common ancestor going back a good few generations. But the thing is, you're probably related to a good few people around this area of West Cork.
Okay, great.
Because, as you know, your great-grandmother was Margaret Collins, the sister of Michael Collins, and there was 8 in that family. And then Michael's father and Margaret's father was the 7th son of a 7th son. And then Margaret's brother Johnny, for example, I think had 10 children, and I think Margaret might have had 14. So there was big families at the time.
They're not invited. Can you imagine that for a Christmas list?
I'd say if you took the family tree down, there's you're talking about thousands.
That's great, that's great. I want to know what the guerrilla warfare was like at that time, and where did they learn their tactics from, and how much activity would have happened around this area?
The people living in the countryside, the farmers and so on, would go out in the evenings or at night attacking British military and police patrols, and then they would melt back into the countryside again afterwards. And when the police or military might come searching houses the following morning, these people were back milking their cows or ploughing in the fields. And
no trace, no ability to trace what they'd done.
No, very hard to know who was responsible for what went on.
The key components of Michael Collins's IRA military strategy were flying columns, small, highly mobile groups of trained guerrilla fighters who swept from the hills to ambush army convoys and attack police stations. With their intimate knowledge of the countryside, the flying columns could outwit the British Army despite its vastly superior numbers.
I know your grandfather then would have been part of the support network within the IRA for those flying columns. If the IRA were going attacking a barracks, for example, in a town, the other IRA volunteers would start chopping down trees and they would maybe start blowing up bridges and so on. And that was to stop then British reinforcements coming in their lorries to support the besieged barracks or whatever.
That's very interesting, because here it says that my grandfather took part in the destruction of these following bridges: Kilravan,
yeah.
Onahincha, Castlefrey. Are these all very well known to you?
They would be probably within 2 miles of where we are here now at the moment. Gosh. All local little places.
Now there's a particular incident that's happened here. It happened in Lissavard. I don't know, are we close to that? Is it around here?
I think it might be a place called Peaky in the Saggart, and there's actually just up here in the hill just up behind us. So if you like, I'll take you up there and we can have a look at it.
That would be fantastic, thank you.
Okay, yeah, we'll just head up along this way.
Okay, I'll follow you.
By the time Dervla's grandfather Finian took to the hills around Lissavard, the area was flooded with British troops closing in on the IRA guerrillas. Michael Collins's military strategy was under increasing pressure.
Yeah, this is the spot where that incident happened back in July 1921 during the War of Independence.
It's just beautiful here, isn't it? I mean, look at this.
Back then it was a dangerous place for people. The British Navy had warships, you know, patrolling the coast just off the Galley Head there as well.
Tim, this Major Percival, do you know anything about him?
I do. There was another group of British forces here in West Cork called the Essex Regiment. And the commander of that regiment was Major Percival. And as the War of Independence progressed, he began to use IRA tactics against the IRA. He set up a flying column himself of British soldiers. And these British soldiers, Percival's column, would cut through the countryside, hundreds of them. And some people reckon there was 1.5 miles of Essex soldiers trying to entrap IRA men who were in the Artfield Peninsula just south of us here. And your grandfather would have been in this little enclosure here with these flaming torches with the other men, and they wanted to let those volunteers know that this Percival's column was coming. They were signalling the IRA here to the south, and those men would have just thrown themselves flat down here then at one point, and the British military would have passed at either side of this little enclosure. So the whole thing was extremely dangerous, yeah. And if your grandfather and his comrade were found here that night, the consequences would be unthinkable, really.
The thing that strikes a chord with me is that, as a mother myself with 2 young children, to think of my 17-year-old son fighting would be just terrifying. Because of this awful cycle of violence that both the IRA and the British Army had found themselves in, I feel that obviously there is a story to be told on both sides here. But personally, being able to stand outside of it all, I find it's just a great sadness, I feel. Because of course we're dealing with a life and death situation, and I understand the passion involved, but I will always fight for peace. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
Just days after Finian's escape from the British Army at Lissavard, a truce was declared. Between 1919 and 1921, over 1,400 people had been killed. In December 1921, the Sinn Féin party sent a delegation to London, led by Michael Collins, to negotiate a treaty that would determine Ireland's future. As part of the settlement, Ireland would have its own government and army and become known as the Irish Free State. But 6 of the counties of Ulster would remain part of the United Kingdom, and the Irish Free State would still be a dominion of the British Crown. For some people back in Ireland, Michael Collins's treaty was seen as a betrayal. Dervla is meeting historian Dr. Edward Madigan.
Can you tell me how the treaty went down here in Ireland?
Well, I mean, the treaty was extremely divisive. The members who sit in the Parliament in Dublin have to pledge an oath of allegiance to the British King, George V. So this is not an independent republic at all. It's a dominion. So people who opposed the treaty argued that, well, everyone who's died now since 1916, if we accept this treaty, they've died in vain. The people who supported the treaty, Collins and others, their argument was, all right, well, this treaty is not ideal, it's not perfect, but it's the best we're going to get under the circumstances. It's a famous quotation, but Collins's point of view was that the treaty didn't give Ireland freedom, but it gave Ireland the freedom to achieve freedom. But it split the Sinn Féin party, it divided the IRA, and it led to a civil war that really tore the country apart.
The Irish Civil War began in April 1922, when anti-treaty forces occupied the Four Courts building in Dublin, refusing to accept Collins's deal with Britain. The new Free State Army, led by Michael Collins, bombarded the building, starting a year of bitter fighting.
You would have had brother against brother, father against son, neighbour against neighbour. Very often for men who were in the IRA, it was comrade against comrade. It's one of the most tragic episodes in Irish history. Irish people have been struggling for independence for centuries, yet the first thing they did with independence when they got it was go to war against each other.
I have a personal account of what my grandfather was going through at this time. He says that on the passing of the treaty, I took an active part in securing as many of the company as possible to take the pro-treaty side. Those of us who did take the pro-treaty side were repeatedly threatened by the battalion staff. We were all practically on the run until I left the district in April 1922, so he's specifically talking about his experience here in West Cork.
Among the officer corps of the IRA, so officers in the IRA, there would have been very strong anti-treaty feeling. So anyone in their midst who gave voice to pro-treaty feelings